take me back to your earliest memories of wrestling. I heard this is something you bonded with, particularly with your dad over, right?
Yeah, but those are the emotional connections, the early fibers that became the tapestry that will be my career. But yeah, it's just over having a connection with someone that is a positive entity in your life. For me, I was fortunate it was my father, and it was through the vehicle of wrestling. So wrestling then played a part in most of my development. But I think to anyone out there, it's just finding a connection, anything. It could be chess, it could be knitting, it could be just taking walks in silence together sometimes. But finding a connection to a child or to someone you care about is very important for the growth and development of that child.
What is it about wrestling that you think resonated with you as a kid? Was it maybe a form of escape? Was it the larger than life characters? What was it that sort of struck a chord with you?
I believe it's all that and then some. Being a father now, thank God, I see in my young son that we enjoy wrestling and playing and just that good feeling of one another, love through touch. That's something. And then you have the pageantry, the colors, the stories, and what accompanied wrestling for me was my father's dialogue. He would, if Superfly Snuka was there, my father would tell me whatever it was that he knew about Snuka, about the Fiji Islands, it just opened up different worlds of interest for me as a child, as I think it would for any inquisitive child. So I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, for sure. I think back to sort of my childhood, and my dad in particular wasn't sort of into wrestling as such, but when I was watching it, he'd be telling me these stories of like World of Sport wrestling in the UK when he was younger, and the Giant Haystacks and all those guys, right? So is that you sort of bond over?
Yeah, it's the interaction. It's really, at the end of the day, you could be talking about anything, but having a genuine connection to someone and fostering a bond and having that bond quicken through something is very important. Again, just in the development as us as human beings.
And who were the guys back then that were your sort of heroes when you were first introduced to the world of wrestling?
Well, it's funny, for all of the sweet connections with wrestling and love, I was drawn to the antagonists. Rowdy Piper was my favorite. The Masked Superstar was another one. Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. I always enjoyed the heel. I enjoyed the antagonist because of the ability to ruffle up the waters and at the very least make them appear deep.
Yeah, I think for every kid, especially when I was growing up with my friends, every kid sort of had this dream of being a wrestler at some point, right? So how did you go from, that kid watching wrestling with your dad to making the actionable steps in learning how to do this? Because I think everyone wants to do it, but that first step often puts people off, and that's the hardest step, right? So what was your first step into taking action on that dream?
What a great question, and hopefully the answer can help someone. So for me, I didn't know you could become a wrestler. I've said this before. I thought you were just born Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? Just one of those things. But then when it was shown to me that there's a path there, I was in a gym working out, and a guy who became a friend, was wearing a wrestling t-shirt. And this was long before the time where those were commonplace. So we struck up a conversation. He showed me a different printout of schools where you could learn to do this. But I'll bring it back to the fact that when I presented that idea to my father, he was very encouraging. He empowered me, he gave me the launch pad from which to jump. Wow, go ahead and do that. Just don't get hurt. Because, listen, how many guys make it? How many don't? At least finish school, at least get your degree. And he was right about all that. But originally it was not knowing you could do it and then finding a reputable place and having the courage and having someone support you to say, go do that. Try that, because you never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's massive. And when you took those steps, was there an end goal attached to it, or was it more just enjoying the process?
Yeah, I that's one thing I look back upon which I look back, is I never had an end goal. I never said, by the time this is done, I'm going to be this. I got swept up in this wave that came, this wind, the divine wind, and I said, whoa, this is happening. And I was very careful to always have a lot of gratitude to say, oh my God, this is happening. Oh my God, this is happening, as opposed to, let me control what is happening. So, yeah, once those first steps came, it just went whoosh.
So when you eventually took that first step into a wrestling school. What was it like, the learning curve? Because I think for a sport like this, it's very easy to look silly trying to do it, right? It's a massive learning curve of a sport. So what was the learning curve like for you when you first started?
Well, I think what they identify now is as some type of, I guess they would call it a learning disability. I think it's a learning enhancement. I would watch wrestling in such a unique way where when I would be wrestling with my dad or when I would be playing with my action figures, I would be replicating the mechanics of the moves a
Mm.
lot. I understood. I was able to see that when you body slam me, that my hand is somewhere around your hip, maybe your upper thigh, some depending. Why is that? Once I got into the school where they kind of opened the doors and said, this is why, I said, oh, because I've seen Jumping Jim Brunzell do that. Oh, I saw Johnny Saint, the way he stepped with his right foot first while grabbing the left wrist. I just always had the nuanced ability. And also having the idea of what it's supposed to look like on TV helped. I started as a referee because I had gotten injured very early on. So in order to still be a part of the stew, they would let me ref. I knew what a referee was supposed to do. I knew you just kind of know how to act those parts.
Mm. How old were you then when you had your first official match, so to say?
I think I was 25. I started very late. I was afraid of my life, as a lot of people are. I was afraid to take chances. And I was getting to a point in my life where, again, my dad was very instrumental, as in a try that. My mom also was always a very try it. What's the worst thing that happens? You don't like it. So this was one of those things where I said, God, I really want this. And I also, for whatever it's worth, I like pray a lot, put a lot of things out there into the universe. And if those things are wanted in earnest, the universe will return them.
Mm. It's crazy, really, because I think in today's day and age, 25 would be considered quite late to start, right? I mean, you've got kids on the main roster in WWE now who are like 21 years old, and they've been learning since they were 12, even some of them. So back then, was 25 still quite a late age to start your development?
So this is so cliche, but I always just saw it as a number. I never went around and introduced myself and then asked people how old they were. It was, and also there's a maturity too. I may have been 25 on the calendar and the driver's license, but I may have had the maturity of an 18-year-old. You'd have to ask my peers at the time. But having the young guys on the roster, it's the same thing with sport. You have them from the neck down, and then it's your job to mold them from the neck up. Right? How many times we see great footballers so young, so talented, but they just didn't understand the game. Those little nuances of where to be, where not to be, where to let the ball go, where to not. You see this also with wrestling. So I guess I came in at the right time. I don't know.
Mm. What were the sort of emotions of that first match? I've heard a lot of wrestlers say that, that very first match, even if it's in, a half-empty leisure centre, you're in the UK with like 10 people, that first match is almost scarier than making your WWE debut.
I was very fortunate that the school where I had trained had a very familial atmosphere. Everyone genuinely wanted to see everyone else succeed. There was not a lot of backbiting. So I had a great support system there. I also had my trainer, Johnny Rods, who, when you hold it up to all the other things, anything that was going to happen, anything that was going to go wrong, Johnny has seen it and has a fix for it. So you don't have to worry. So that buoyed me, that allowed me in. And then there's the gratitude and the emotion of, holy cow, I'm doing this. At that moment, if you told me you would go on to go do WrestleMania and Wrestle Kingdom and all these things, I would tell you you're crazy. At that moment, all it was that outdoor show at that summer resort. And I'm not ashamed to say that I got emotional before, and I got even more emotional afterwards. I got really emotional on the drive home when it was just me by myself, because I was living my dream. And that's so, overwhelming.
Yes, it's clear that, we've already touched on there not being an end goal, but you obviously enjoyed the process so much. So if your wrestling career had maybe just amounted to you working your 9-to-5 job in the week and you had wrestling matches on the weekend, would that have been enough?
Absolutely, because it goes back to, I never knew that you could.
Hmm.
So if you do the math, let's say I'm Johnny, the phys ed teacher, which isn't too far off. I'm Matt, the social studies teacher. And I was making a couple of $100 on a Friday and a Saturday, maybe selling some pictures and doing what I love. And maybe I wasn't married and didn't have a family. It's a pretty nice existence there.
Hmm.
But once other things come into play, and we can get into it, there was no way I would have been able to maintain what I was doing and still complete my deep desire to have a family. So at some point I had to make a choice.
Yeah. How did you first get on the radar of WWE and get noticed by the people you needed to be noticed by?
I guess it's through affiliations. I had started working in Delaware with a company called ECWA, promoter by the name of Jim Kettner, and he had a pipeline. I had gone to do extra work via Jim Kettner. Also just kind of being around the independent scene in the Northeast and having a particular look. It wasn't lost on me at that time, because if you look at the trajectory of what happens, the John Cena kind of comes into the landscape right around the same time. Clearly they were looking for a particular look, a particular something, so I kind of flirted with that. I didn't have the height, but other than that, I kind of had similarities when I was younger. And then I had a national teaching issue come up with newspapers and things, and that really put me on their radar. I had wrestled Tommy Dreamer previously. He was now in a position of making a decision. Everyone had positive things to say about my work, the look. There wasn't any really X mark on me. So that's how they brought me along.
And we don't obviously need to go into it, but as you alluded to there, where your sort of hand was almost forced in a way to go head first into this world of pro wrestling. Were you ready to go all in at that time?
And the theme, it goes back to my dad. I'll never forget sitting in my car. So I'm sitting in the driver's seat. He's in the passenger seat. I think I've mentioned this. That's a juxtaposition of roles from a child to a parent, just in and of the visual. And the whole thing broke, and WWE had just called, and my father just turned to me. He had big green eyes, and I have both my mom and my dad's eyes. My mom's eyes are blue, my dad's eyes are green. He turned to me with these wide eyes. He had this mustache, and he's like, "You gotta do it, Butch. You gotta do it." And I was just, dude, you could have fucking put a cape on me to see his belief. If nothing else, you've got to go to answer this call. And it was like, wow. You really believe in me. I can't fail.
Well, yeah, I love that. It's giving me goosebumps in a way, because I think that's kind of just what every kid wants, right? They want the sort of that parental figure to believe in them, for someone other than themselves to believe in them. That's like strapping a rocket on your back.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well said.
Well, when you first got that call, when you first started making your inroads into the WWE, I heard on a podcast many years ago, Paul London tell a story where he said you were in Nevada, and this was about the time where JBL was holding the title, and they eventually threw your stuff out of the locker room, made you change elsewhere as a form of hazing. So what was the hazing culture like, and how did you receive it? Did you receive it well, or did it kind of affect you mentally?
So in retrospect, now that I'm a quasi-grown man, I played into a lot of it because I thought this was what I'm supposed to do. I had made a passing comment that at the time in the SmackDown culture, it was very toxic. There was a lot of fear for spots. And I had come in, and again, I'm not the biggest guy, but I was a young guy, good looking guy, I could work, I had a good body, I could talk. That was a big thing. And I ended up, in retrospect, also not realizing it, being openly romantically linked, dating one of the new divas. So there's also that macho thing of, oh, new girl, new meat, we want her. Hey, new guy, get out of the way. And a lot of these guys are big and have tenure in the business. So bullying, I guess, or demanding respect is something that comes naturally. So some of the things I said, I should have shut my mouth. I will take full ownership of that. But still, some of the things I said were blown up and inflated. They needed someone. To my understanding, that Batista was in the doghouse. Now, this tells you how crazy. A guy like Batista had heat with all these guys. And that week I kind of came along, and it was just a perfect opportunity for the bullseye to go on Big Dave, who's going to make the money, to this little guy who we can kind of poke around a little bit. But I actually enjoyed the segregation because I am a loner by trade. I loved finding that janitor's closet. I loved finding that area in the back of the arena. And even better, once the ECW guys got wind of it, they all were like, yo, dress with us, dress with us. And it was kind of like, cool, I have a place. Even if it is the Misfits, I have a place. I ended up going to WrestleMania with those guys. So maybe I belonged more with them than I belonged with the others. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for people outside of the business, this is where people struggle with what that kind of behavior is trying to achieve, right? Because I remember you telling a story about, I think it was Chris Benoit, like shouting you out and then, was telling you that he needed to make an example out of you. So what exactly are people trying to achieve in that kind of locker room culture? And does it achieve anything?
So it's a great question because if it's done in earnest, it can achieve a lot. It can achieve respecting the business and appreciating the fact that these guys came before you and these guys had to drive 400 miles. They didn't have buses. They weren't getting high six-figure contracts and stuff. That's all great. But then there was the psychosocial dysfunction that wrestling, alcohol, drugs, performance-enhancing drugs, and just massive egos can bring out, especially in men. And that was the negative part of it. So there's a good and a bad, a yin and a yang to everything. But when Chris Benoit was reading me the riot act in front of the gallery and then pulling me aside and speaking to me normally and explaining to me why, it really gave me a deep insight into the dark psychosocial dysfunction that can easily happen in wrestling. And there's a reason everything happened, so I'm glad it happened the way it happened.
I wonder as well, because for fans, we may just assume that to get somewhere in the WWE, it's all on talent. If you're good in the ring, you'll get to this, that, and the other. But how much politicking goes on in sort of making the right networking, the right connections, being on the right person's right side? How much of that is part of it?
So, of all people, it was Triple H that gave me great advice, and it was right at the apex of my heat. It was him and Sean. We were online for overseas to get on a flight, and it was just him and Sean, and I had extra like bags more so, and Hunter was like, what is that? I was like, oh, these are my peace offerings. It was a bottle of this for JBL. It was a bottle of this for that. And I was like, dude, what do I do? And he's like, you can bump your ass off. You can sell. You can talk. At the end of the day, they're all going to want to work with you. At the end of the day, they're all, at the very least, going to want you to sell their finisher. Just, keep your mouth shut. Don't be a dick. But beyond that, that's it. And that's when it hit me like, you can politic all you want and you can whatever, but cream will always rise to the top. If John Cena was just a politicker, now, he wasn't the greatest wrestler when he started, but at the end of the day, when you look back on the body of work, you go, damn, the guy had talent. Then there are others that were supposed to get pushes that didn't have the talent and they disappear. And we see those guys like, where are they now? Is on like, the internet and YouTube, and they become a footnote in history. So Hunter put it into me with the hazing and all the bullshit and all that. I could still bump my ass off. I could still protect myself because Johnny taught me how to wrestle defensively. And I could still cut a promo that can get anyone over. And that's what I relied on.
Yeah. Was there anyone else at sort of that stage of your career that, you learned a lot from? Maybe you saw as a mentor figure?
Yes. And when I look back at the names, I go, oh, duh, of course they were. So I mentioned John Cena. Cena was great with me because anytime he would see me, he would always just be like, yo, keep your head up. Yo, this will pass. Don't worry. Like, he was always kind of like, again, similar to a father figure, but an older brother. Like, just keep your chin up, kid. Kane was another guy who was a first guy to say, listen, it's called sell it. Don't sell it to these guys. Don't walk around with that face like, they're breaking your heart. Because they are. We all know you love this place. You just want to be here. So guys like that had that, they were empaths, I guess. William Regal was another one who was one of the first people that kind of mattered, openly said, I have no problem with this guy. This guy's okay. I'm not going to go along with this sheep mentality. So those are some people off the top of my head. And lastly is Vince, because if Vince wasn't on my side, I wouldn't be here talking to you. So there's that.
What was your relationship like with Vince? I've heard very different stories of people who've had fantastic relationships and people who've had, the opposite experience. So What was your relationship with Vince, with the interactions you had?
The interactions I had with Vince on a professional level were all very encouraging and informative to me as a growing professional in the industry, whether it be as an announcer, as a wrestler, as a booker. Vince also, and I often thought in WWE, so I'm not 6 feet tall. I often thought that my height, as I thought it was a detriment, actually turned out to be a benefit, because a lot of these taller guys, they kind of like just talking here where there is no one, and that kind of falls down a few inches to my ears. Vince would often say things in passing that I was just like, is he talking to me or is he just talking? Because that was super, altruistic or informative. So my relationship with him was positive because it was always a growing learning experience. And also, I never offered any idea unless the opening was there. A lot of guys, hey, Vince, what do you think about this? No, that's not your job. Your job is for me to tell you my idea. And that, so the times that I was able to offer creative things, it was because there was an opening, and those creative things were actually used on television. And that was another thing that I think, to use the word again, buoyed me in Vince's mind. Like, he gets it. He's creative and he'll help us make money, and he doesn't want it to be because of him. I'll become the champion, and then no, he has an idea for this guy and that guy and that guy.
I suppose another part of your development, which I've heard you speak about in the past, is that were you the guy who, well, obviously you have those guys at shows maybe that they have their match and they maybe clock out for the night and they go elsewhere, but you took advantage of the opportunity to sort of get into the viewing, the watching, the studying, the learning of the greats whilst you had the opportunity, right?
It was never a thought in my mind to not know, how does this work? Even as a kid, I always wanted to know, if nothing else, how does that work? So after my match, great, wonderful, marvelous, I'll get dried off. A lot of times I wouldn't even change out of my gear, because once you change out of your gear, everything that hurts starts to hurt more. So like if your boots are nice and tight, your knees are wrapped, they'll stay less painful as you cool down. And I would sit and I would watch the next match, because remember, the matches are part of a card. What you did in your match will inform what I am supposed to do in mine, and what the person next to us is supposed to do. And then finally, the main event is supposed to be a wonderful culmination of all. That is no longer the case, but that's how it's supposed to go. So I had my little 10 minutes such and such with someone, but hey man, Undertaker and so-and-so are about to go do 15 minutes broken up into 2 segments for television. I want to know exactly how that works. Headphones on. So now I'm not just watching the match. Oh, Taker got into the heat with that. Oh, so-and-so was the comeback with it. It's the camera set. Okay, guys, let's stay tight on Taker's face. I want to see the pain. And then I can hear Vince say to Michael Cole, tell me that you haven't seen Taker in pain like this in quite some time. Go. And you understand? Now I get the big picture. So that's what it was like for me.
Yeah. So, excited about that. No, it's amazing. So you kind of gravitated as well towards the sort of not so sexy stuff, let's put it, the background, the operations, the production as well, not just the wrestling, the action.
Yeah, so, if anyone that understands technology, there's something called AWS here in the U.S., and for most Western states, that's the server that carries everything, and when that goes down, people lose their minds.
Yeah.
How many people in a room of 100 understand that part? We all love the product. We all love when, the Amazon or whomever drops that item off. We all love that. How does it happen? And what happens when that goes down? Who fixes that? That's important to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, moving on to the sort of part of your career where I first, became familiar with your work as a young kid, is the no, it's great. I want to talk about the Kurt Angle Invitational, right? Matt Martell, that very first one of the trilogy, the way you took control of the mic very early on. You come out, you're not a household name at this point. You just take the mic. And I felt that was like a real statement of what you were capable of on the mic, to sort of have that confidence to come out there in the ring with a Kurt Angle and sort of take control of the narrative.
Well, that is right on the heels of my best friend, my father, saying, you got to do this, Butch. So that's in my heart. That's in my head. And to that point, and I have mentioned this, Vince McMahon noticed that because he pulled me aside, and it's unheard of for him to talk to extra talent, if at all. And, hey, Vince wants to see you. And it's like, hey, you have a lot of poise was the word he used, a lot of poise on the mic. And I guess I just kind of put that in my head that if I ever do get here, he likes that. Do more of that. And then if you look at my body of work, I just kept doing the same exact thing I did on that SmackDown in Philadelphia. I want to say it was in February, but I could be wrong, because there was poise. And you can't timidly take the microphone from an Olympic. You go, do that shit. If he punches me in the face, he punches me in the face. And that's it. And that was what, captured that moment, was that first initial, I have a question for you.
To get the opportunity at that point in your career, as you mentioned, as an extra talent, to work with someone like Kurt Angle once is a fantastic opportunity. What were the conversations? How did it lead to this becoming a 3-match thing?
That's all the writers, and that again, I bring that back to divine circumstance, because I believe that science is too perfect to not be divine. The universe is too perfect to not be somehow designed by something. It can't just be random chaos that continues to fall into order over and over and over for thousands and thousands of years. It's just impossible. Now I've lost sight of the question here. What was that like with Kurt Angle, and how those things come about? So the first one with Kurt Angle, he didn't know me. I didn't know him. A lot of guys were going to TNA at the time. So Kurt did say that if you don't tap out on the ankle lock, I will truly turn your ankle till it pops, because the thought was that I was going to take those gold medals and show up on TNA television on a Thursday. Like, I get that, but no. The second one, I came in with a bit more fanfare because of the teaching scandal and stuff. So Kurt knew me. We put together, then I don't want to give too much away, right? There's still some mystery to wrestling, but we had some ideas about how long that match was supposed to go. It was not supposed to go down to the last second, which is why I again bring in the universe, because if it hadn't gone down to that last second, if it wasn't just such good television, I wouldn't be again talking to you. And the third one just came as I was supposed to win the medals, and I was a little snug on a chokehold. Kurt returned favor with a nice kick right here, and then the idea came up that it would be Eugene would be far more entertaining to win the gold medals, and that was correct. But being a little too snug with Kurt on the rear naked kind of put a little lemon in my water for a minute.
Yeah, and I want to get to that as well, but just going back a little bit to that second one now, I remember being visibly stressed watching that second challenge.
You and me both, bro.
The final minute of that match, I watched it earlier today again, found it on YouTube. The final minute of that match is amazing storytelling. And I think it's a testament to you both, really, that you had a 1-minute promo and a 3-minute match, and you were able to jam so many emotional ups and downs, and there were points in the match where you were convinced, oh, okay, Kurt's going to win this, right. And then there was a point where I think there's like 5 seconds on the clock, and even I know the result. I was watching it earlier. I kind of gaslit myself into thinking, actually, he's going to win here. Like, there's genuinely not enough time. So the ability to jam that much storytelling into what was a 5-minute segment is incredible.
And I appreciate that, but I can't take any credit for it, because again, it goes back to, if I did, you'd know I were lying, because then you'd have to believe that I was at the very least half as good as a storyteller as that story is at that particular stage in my career on such a grand stage in my hometown or hometown adjacent. So what happened there again was divine intervention. So there's a spot where I give Kurt a boot in the butt, and he spills out to the floor. He was not supposed to spill out to the floor.
Oh, wow.
And he was not supposed to stay out there as long as he did. I don't want to speculate on the why, but bleh. But what I will kind of at least put my fingerprint on is I'm selling. I want to say it's my arm. I look up at the Titantron and I see the seconds. And in my head, I say, in phony pro wrestling, I'm supposed to wait right here. So he could roll back in and get me. But if I'm truly trying to win this thing, I should back away from him slowly. And that's what I do. I back away. I get really far away, and I'm looking around because I don't know what the heck to do. But this is about to happen. And if you watch very closely, go back and do it, Kurt rolls in. And I kind of give him my right foot. With my toe, I'm just like, here I am. If you want to still keep this how it's supposed to be, here it is. And my man grabs me and squeezes as hard as he can, pardon my language. And I tap, and it's, if you watch, I could have tapped at 3. I kind of wait, and 1. And then I bring my foot up to my area here. So my face and my foot are in the shot. And later Kurt told me that when he looked back, he was frantic because he thought he had messed up. He looked back and saw my cell or whatever, and he saw the people and he saw the clock, and he realized we just did some really good TV.
Yeah.
And it was those things all coming together that A, I knew my instincts were correct. B, anything can happen at any time in pro wrestling. I know they say the guys plan everything in the back. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But the best stuff is the stuff that just happens.
Yeah. Was that, because it obviously turned out to be such great TV, was it received well backstage, or were people a little bit on edge at how close it got?
It was hooting and hollering, and it goes on Vince's reaction. If Vince was mad or upset, everyone would have been mad and upset. They're all sycophants, I guess would be the word. And I understand it. It shouldn't be that way, but at the time, that was the culture. But Vince stood up, his headset came out, damn it, that's good TV. And through that, he was hugging Kurt and the producers, and I'm just kind of slipping down the side. And it was Victoria who said, "Are you signed with us?" And I was just like, I don't know. And here's the irony. Do you know who said to me, because I went to go back into the locker room, whatever, you know who said, don't go hide in the locker room. Don't go in there. You stand right out there by the monitors so that when Johnny, Vince, and all them walk by, they can at least see your face and say, come with me. I'll give you one guess who you think that person could have been that gave me that advice, given what we've already talked about.
John Cena?
Chris Benoit.
Wow.
Of all the people.
Wow.
The person I wouldn't be, I get chills on stuff like that because that becomes the guy that then is my tormentor. And then that becomes the guy who goes down in history for whatever. So there's that.
Wow. Real full circle moment.
Right?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, on that, to go back to what you said about that third match, I was watching an interview with Kurt Angle earlier, who said that he stiffed you in that match with the kick, and that he owes you a huge apology for being too stiff in that match. Was your bell really that wrong?
Oh, yeah. So I had played hockey in my life before that. I had wrestled and I had been, whatever. That was where I learned. Do you ever see there's a movie, Rocky, with Sylvester Stallone, where Rocky says to his cornerman, there's 3 of them, Mick. And Mick says, hit the one in the middle. He's not kidding. If anyone's ever had their bell rung, your whole plane shifts, but you don't. So there's 3 of everything. And you can see me if you watch me on the match. I'm reaching for the ropes to get my balance that aren't there. They're here. They're behind me, but I'm reaching here because I'm all distorted. And then Kurt gets me up, I want to say, maybe into an angle slam and then maybe into the ankle lock, but I'm loose jelly. You could see my limbs. So yeah, that was one of the first. And at the end of the day, that's my fault because I'm feeding. I'm trusting. I gave you Kurt Angle or your Kurt Hawkins. I should at the very least kind of get a hand up there. But what do you want me to tell you?
Well, on to some of the promo stuff. And I don't want to sound like I'm just blowing smoke or something here, but I genuinely, the other day, there was a screenshot that I saw on Facebook. It was on a couple of wrestling fan pages. And someone had gone back to an old forum, a wrestling forum in 2006, where someone had made their 10 predictions for the future of wrestling. And I was looking at number 4 was Matt Stiker will go down as one of the greatest on the mic in WWE. And I saw a lot of comments, people, today's comments, people were, saying just how good and underrated you were on the mic. So why do you think that promos and work on the mic was something that came so well to you?
So I want to address that first thing too, and I will, because that's one thing that sticks with me is the perception that is now had of me being negative, and I don't want to place all the blame on overproduction, but there's a stark difference in that time period there where I'm just allowed to be myself. And the reason people enjoyed it, to answer your question, is because I had been doing it since I'm 7. So I have 4 sisters, but the closest one in age to me was 6 years older. So I had one best friend with whom I'm still friendly today, thank God. But I spent a lot of time alone playing with wrestling figures, G.I. Joe figures, superhero figures, played a lot of sports, but by myself. So the ball off the wall, or my friend and I, Matteo, an Italian boy, we do something called Shots at the Junk, where he would pretend to be whatever the footballer of the day was. Okay, I'm Maradona, you're Walter Zenga, you have to save this. Okay, I'm Van Basten, you're the... And we would play these games, but the commentary would be so natural to us. So that just was a natural segue into commentating as a commentator. Promos, I always knew. I still see guys today, you know, they kind of cock their body to the side and they give you this voice and this cadence that is so very forced. And that's not real, because when Jake the Snake Roberts talks to you, he is able to lure you in. So these are the things I took, but the commentary was changed when people that I wanted to impress started to say, hey, say this, hey, do more of this. And then once I got labeled with a political slant, at least over here, that's very hard to shed, because the generation passes that on to the next generation, and there isn't an opportunity given for people to A, explain themselves, or B, change. It really is more about change than anything else. We have an issue going on with a wrestler now. I'm seeing kind of things, Trey Miguel, not to date this, has some kind of issues about some things he had said in the past, and a contract was taken away, and he has come out and apologized. And I'm seeing more and more people say that it's okay to apologize. It's okay, we accept you. Yet 3 years ago, someone else was not so lucky to receive society's embrace. And those are things that I wish for wrestlers, performers, commentators. You know, we're playing a character at the end of the day. This is real. The conversation you and I are having is who I truly am. See me on the street, talk to me, and hopefully you'll like me, but don't just hate me because of a character played on TV.
And it's hard, almost impossible to notice that at the time without hindsight, like what that could...
You know, you can't expect, listen, if we truly want to get along in a society, get along as human beings, then we have to give each other the leeway and the accommodations that we ourselves would want, you know? So that's all it is. I just think, you know, we grow. Human beings grow. We change. You don't get fruit from a seed, but you do get fruit from a plant, but you do not get plant without the seed.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, we talked at the very start, we were talking about, you know, watching wrestling with our fathers. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Stiker's school. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I have a very vivid memory of watching. So in the UK, obviously, the SmackDown Raw is on at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. So we would always get SmackDown as a highlight show on a Saturday morning. So it was like Saturday morning TV for us. So I always remember watching Saturday morning SmackDown, or a recap show of Raw, and my father would be there with me, and he wasn't so much into wrestling, but he sort of encouraged and sort of played along with it, and he would sort of know how to get under my skin, but he would always root for the heels on the show and sort of try and aggravate me a little bit. And I remember during Stiker's school, my dad would always say, this is, because I was just viewing you as a teacher, right? And I was thinking about my teachers in school, and my dad was saying, this is the guy, you know, this is the guy you need to be listening to. Listen to what he's saying. He's going to teach you the right things. And he would almost do it to get under my skin. So I have great memories of that segment. How much involvement did you have with the development of that character and those segments?
So this is one of the unique things where, you know, I pretty much was 99% all me. And that came from being able to earn Stephanie McMahon's trust, because before that I had been doing things for .com and other little things, and they saw that I could kind of sort of talk. And then they would put me with Dusty Rhodes for a little bit, and Dusty would endorse it, and Dusty's a great talker. And then I'd work with Paul Heyman as a producer, and Paul's a great talker, and he would endorse it. And then finally Steph and Vince ultimately would see some of these little segments, these Stiker's classrooms, the words, whatever it was I was doing, and said, okay, let's let them run. But obviously they're not going to just take something blindly and put it on their TV. I had written what I had written. The writers also need to put their fingerprints on it. Otherwise they're not needed. So there was a little bit of someone doing this here and that there, but ultimately Stephanie and Vince said, this is great. And you can write your own stuff. And so I did.
Yeah. I think the one way to sort of get yourself over as a heel to a generation of kids is to say school is cool, because I remember my dad latching onto that at the time.
It was so simple, and it was Vince that added the nuance. So anyone out there that cooks or bakes, you know, we can all follow a recipe, but it's always the pros that know how to, oh, it's a little bit of nutmeg. That's my secret. Oh, it's a substance. Vince said, smile. I want you to smile. And that smile, anytime I felt that maybe I was losing the crowd or I wanted a big boo, be such and such, and it was that cadence too, la, 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 la.
Yeah.
Yeah, boo! The smile was my placeholder, and he knew that.
Yeah. That was amazing. I sort of, when you look back at the in-ring version of that match, Striker, how happy are you with how that character sits in the zeitgeist of pro wrestling now?
Great word. Look at you. Again, I didn't have an idea of how it would be perceived. My bumps, I thought, were always good. I always thought I made it look like I got my ass kicked. There isn't a lot of me on offense out there. There isn't a lot of me winning. I have a young son. Eventually, he's going to learn about my former identity. He's going to want to watch my matches and be like, Daddy, why are you always losing? And I got to explain to him that was my job. But a lot of it I'm okay with because fundamentally it's sound, psychologically it's sound. It's actually when I go back to watch some of the stuff towards the end of my career on the indies where I'm just like, oh gosh, I was so lazy there. Or, oh man, I can really see how psychology has changed. But the WWE stuff, I think, the body of work is okay.
Mm. Well, one match you can show your son is you getting a win over the current world champion CM Punk.
Yes. Yeah. Punk and I worked a lot together. We knew each other from the indies. This is a time where not a lot of guys came from the indies and made it to WWE TV. We kind of ushered in that generation, whereas now that's what it is. So Punk and I had familiarity with each other. You also look at a guy, here's the time he was American Dragon, with Bryan Danielson. We knew each other. But the wins over Punk, they were fun, but I think I was used more to test Punk than to give me any kind of elevation.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of which, I was looking today on YouTube. Someone's uploaded a playlist of like 60 of your matches in order. And, I was going through them on YouTube and I was seeing all these, amazing names you work with. Obviously, I've forgotten some of them that you had these matches. Obviously, Angle, John Cena, Sandman, Sabu, Undertaker, those wins over CM Punk. So looking back, who are some of your favorites you got the chance to work with?
Within WWE, it would be the guys that I had, with whom I had good relationships. Rob Van Dam and I were very, very friendly. Sandman and I, still to this day, speak. Tommy Dreamer and I also, a deep friendship to where I could punch him in the face as hard as physically possible, and he'd be okay with it because there was a camera 2 feet away. I had no choice. And then he'll turn around and blast me on a house show and say, there was no camera anywhere. There's your receipt. Like, we had that kind of relationship. Kurt Angle was great because deep down, I always fancied myself a wrestler. So if I can move in harmony with an Olympic gold medalist, in my mind, I'm thinking I can take anyone on the street. That was my silliness. So those are the guys that stand out. And guys that may have never made it to WWE or gotten the recognition, one would be Low Key. He wrestled as Caval. I just think everything wrestling is supposed to be was within Low Key. He's real. It's real. And another guy was a guy named Josh Daniels. Again, because of the friendship, we would just beat the ever-loving tar out of each other. So those guys, everyone was good, because you can't say someone's bad because then that means you couldn't handle them. You couldn't make a good match. And Johnny Rodz always taught me I could work with a broomstick. At least I like to think so.
Amazing. Well, before I sort of move on and ask you about your commentary, one random question because I couldn't find confirmation on this. Was it you who did the Ric Flair impersonation on the Cutting Edge segment?
Yes, and that is born from I wasn't comfortable with my own personality in that locker room due to everything that was going on, so I would revert to other personalities and I would do impressions. Roddy Piper, Dusty Rhodes, Johnny Ace. We used to prank call people with me as Johnny Ace, making them think they were going to get fired. This is what the guys thought were funny, and they put me up to it because I was a useful tool to them. But in that, they saw that I could do Rick. And to Edge's credit, Edge is another guy who was my friend. We still talk to this day. He was kind. He was never that bullying type, even though he was part of the hierarchy and could have been. So when he heard that I could do Rick, he had me do it for one of the writers. They were very into that Conan O'Brien. I forget what it's called. Catty something mouth. 3/4 something. And we did it. And when we did it in rehearsal, Vince genuinely laughed. And once he genuinely laughed, we got it. And that was another thing, too, where I didn't have much of a script. And a lot of the things that are getting the reactions are a lot of my facials. There's not a lot of people that make a boo-boo face, or I'll show my teeth or whatever, stick my tongue out. It was fun. We had fun.
Amazing. Well, transitioning then to from in-ring to commentary, it was quite almost a trial by fire, right? You were thrust into that quite quickly. So how was adapting to that situation at such a fast pace?
Everything is trial by fire, and it should be, you know. This is live TV, and you sink or swim. And while I understand there are some people that might not have what's called those chops, this was just something that I had because of the things I had done as a kid. So, yeah, they come to you at noon, and they say, you're going to be doing commentary at 6 p.m. and when doors open, and after you're done changing your pants, you go out there. But for me, it was like, yes. Oh, I can't wait to show you what I can do, you know, because that I felt like, this is me. I've been doing this. I kind of always wanted to do that. And I wish I would have been able to stay there and been there for 20 some odd years. But Michael Cole got there before me, and Michael Cole has a much better pedigree. He's a newsman and making a lot of money over there. So, you know, no room at the inn.
Yeah, I mean, for moments that or opportunities that present themselves that quickly, I suppose it's a case of you sort of rise and fall to how you're able to embrace the opportunities as they come to you, right?
Absolutely, and that's great insight. You know, if you look at something with negativity immediately, it's going to be negative. But if you continue to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kick your ass. Whatever you are, I'm going to do it. Then at least you're better off than the person that never ever tried. You know, that's the old Teddy Roosevelt speech, was a great president. It's called The Man in the Arena. There are those that will constantly disparage what others are doing when them themselves have never done it. It is the man in the arena with the sweat on his face and blah, blah, blah. That is the one, blah, blah, blah.
Love it. I'd love to get your insight into sort of what makes good commentary, because, you know, there are different styles of how this is put on. Some people have, you know, people in their ear. So in your opinion, what's your ideal approach to commentary? Is guidance helpful, or are you best when you're just left to your craft?
The problem that I see, and I don't want to be negative, is that people are pretending to be wrestling commentators. They're only impersonating what they've already heard someone do. And if you're going to impersonate someone, there's a baseball announcer named Vin Scully. He would call games by himself. I've worked for 70 years, and he had this great art. In baseball in the U.S., you aren't supposed to talk when a pitch is thrown. But a lot of the in-between could take forever before the next pitch is thrown. And Vin Scully would tell these stories. But he would have these pauses, and he'd say, and so, when he was a boy growing up in California, here's the 1-2, swung on and missed. Growing up in California, that he would keep you engaged. Also, call it like a sport. At this point, most people know it's not on the up and up, because I've said this before, but I'll make it now relevant here. If Powerhouse Hobbs punches Marco Stunt in the face, Marco Stunt should be dead. And I know he's not wrestling anymore, but you get what I'm trying to say. Make it a sport. Give me validation as to why, you know, maybe Hobbs punched off of his front and off of his back foot and not his front foot and not as much power. I'm sure Stunt's going to be really hurt, but if Hobbs really had gotten him, Lou, it really would be bad. Make it realistic and believable. Don't insult people's intelligence. Because if you continue to do that, you will keep wrestling for the 18 and unders. And that's not where commerce wants wrestling to go. Wrestling, they want it to go not just to the 18 and 35 demographic. They are still chasing the kid that grew up watching wrestling that still has disposable income. So now we're looking at the 18 to 65. That means everyone and their mother is now in this breadth of, we want your money. Speak to them.
Yeah. Was it beneficial for you, having been an in-ring worker? You understand how commentary can help enhance a match. You know the moments where, you know, as an in-ring performer, you need the commentary team to maybe point something out or maybe help lift a moment. Was having that perspective important?
Absolutely. It's invaluable. And it's also invaluable as to with whom you've had the opportunity to, we use the term work, to wrestle, because there are a lot of guys that say, I used to wrestle so I can commentate. Well, did you wrestle Undertaker for 16 nights straight on a South American tour when Big Daddy V got sick on the third night? Did you sit next to Kevin Dunn and Vince McMahon, even though you didn't talk to them, but did you listen to what they were saying? So to me, having that unique ability to see it both ways. And then also you take into consideration that I also chose to go behind the camera to see it three ways. But that's why here in the States, Tom Brady or Tony Romo, former football players, quarterbacks, are great analysts. Gary Lineker can provide something that, Joe Schmo cannot. And this is why that insight is important, depending on how it's presented.
Mm. Just as an aside, are you a big football fan? You just mentioned Gary Lineker there, which is...
Clearly, as a boy growing up, my best friend still to this day is Italian. His name is Matteo from Palermo. So we connected through Italian football. At the time in the 80s, Serie A in Italy was the place to play. You had everyone that you could possibly have. So that's how I became exposed to international football or soccer. And I just think it's amazing as Americans, we speak one language. We think that there are only these sports, but everywhere else on God's green earth, they speak more than one language. They understand soccer, football. The West America is a very, very interesting place culturally. So yes.
Who do you root for, just out of curiosity?
As a boy, I would root for a team called Inter in Italy. Now I really have no allegiance whatsoever. My son is 6, and a lot of videos on YouTube are this raging debate with this term GOAT. And kids are all about Ronaldo's a GOAT, Ronaldo's a GOAT. And I kind of just out of the side of my mouth, I say, I don't know. I think if anyone, it's Messi or there's Maradona, there's Pelé. And if he wants to get into this, we can have this conversation. I'm just waiting for him to be interested in the sport more so than Ronaldo is the GOAT. When I don't know about you, and we can open it up to conversation, I don't think that Ronaldo is even he's great, but he's not a top 3. I think Messi and Pelé, Maradona, there are others. So.
Yeah, it's crazy how, as well, just as an aside, how powerful football is as a sort of a global entity. Because as I touched on at the start of this, I'm from Wales, right? So when I went to America, for example, a lot of people don't even know Wales is its own country. They think it's part of England, right? But when people are asking me when I'm on holiday, where are you from? They go, Wales, Wales. If I say the word like Gareth Bale, who is the most, most famous footballer that come out of Wales, played for Real Madrid, won 5 Champions League. Everyone's like, Gareth Bale. And then that's how they connect it. It's crazy.
It's because of the way the generations are raised. And so as now a father of young children and also an educator, the wrestling is my superhero, right? The secret identity is I have a master's in education and I teach social studies. Seeing how we are starting to give information and concepts to our youth is very intriguing. Now, some people would say, oh, it's terrible with the screens, whatever. But if you can harness it and make it so if Gareth Bale is the connection, I need nothing else. We're connected. So now we can connect. Oh, by the way, you like wrestling? Boom, another connection. Hey, by the way, my favorite color is blue. Oh, well, my favorite color is red. Okay, cool. We're building. Our fibers are connecting. But to your point, people, they can't just make a connection. And it used to be in a time where people were well-read and educated, where they could make a connection and talk of things that maybe you could, even if it's the Cardiff Giants, something where you could at the very least make a connection from me to you, not you having to connect to me. The American cannot connect if it isn't on the American's connection.
Yeah, I love it. And I appreciate the shout out to our capital city there. So back to the commentary, I wonder, is it better as a commentator for you personally to know beat for beat what's coming, or to leave some space for genuine reaction and authenticity?
Clearly the latter, unless there is something that, and here's what I learned, Tommy Dreamer, who is able to write, when he's left to his own devices, he writes wonderful television. A lot of people don't realize that Tommy and Paul Heyman, they wrote ECW on a pizza box. And I've heard that story so many times, but they just sat down in a hotel room one night after killing a pizza with a pen and wrote the Barely Legal pay-per-view. And I'm not just talking about the matches, but the angles, the shots, the pre-tapes anyway. So wanting to know, if a producer needs to say, hey, Matt, heads up, there's going to be a spot where Johnny's going to think he broke his arm. If you need to tell me that, then that means that spot's not going to be executed properly. As opposed to, don't tell me a thing, and then I go, yo, guys, I think he's hurt. Live on air, I'm going to the truck. Yo, guys, and maybe the wrestler's name is, Max Muscle, but his real name is John Jones, and I use his real, hey, guys, I think Johnny's hurt. You as the viewer go, oh, yo. And then everyone's on the internet, did you hear, Matt? much better TV, much better, as opposed to, okay, he's going to do this. Get ready. I want a big reaction in 3, 2, 1. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right, I guess.
Love it. Well, I suppose in today's day and age it's a little bit different. That there's more big companies you can work for, so the landscape's kind of changing now, in which when one door closes, another kind of opens. But if we take you back to that time you were, say, called to the Stamford office and you learned that your contract with WWE wasn't going to be renewed, how do you start to transition from what I can only imagine is a crazy, lifestyle with WWE? Did you struggle with that change? And how did your faith tie into that as well? Because that's been a common theme throughout this conversation.
And thank you for being an insightful interviewer that, you bring those things forward, because I've done so many interviews where that question is kind of asked and never with the tag that you have brought in. And I'm just forced to say, I turned to my faith. But I've likened it to having your best girl break up with you or your best lover say that, I was crestfallen. I was destroyed. I really was. And then it occurred to me that I am putting so much on this earthly thing. Like when I die, I won't take this with me. This might have just ended up being 9 years of my life. Who knows if I live 99 years? It's a 10%. And then I went home and I think I said this in an interview. The first thing you think of in this day and age is how much money do I have to live, right? And you do math and you think, okay, I can live for this many months or years until I have to get a job. The dreaded job. That's next because you're special. You're a WWE superstar. You haven't worked a 9 to 5 in nearly 10 years. You just spent the day at the beach. Now you're going to the gym. Is that going to change? So all that is fear. And a lot of us spend so much time in our lives living in fear. And if you could just put that fear aside and say, okay, what do you got next for me? What am I going to do? And before I could even think about where my teaching license status was, that I have to renew it, start even looking for jobs, I said a little prayer. And it was a night where I used to love to do this, where I had nothing planned. Nothing planned. I was going to order out. I was going to sit on the couch. I was just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing. And the phone rang. And it was Krista Joseph from Lucha Underground. And in that moment, and I guess the dog is dreaming next to me, and I apologize for that. In that moment, I had a job. The next day, I was on a flight to California, so there was no lapse whatsoever, which I see a lot of in NFL football, American football. A lot of coaches get fired on a Friday. On Monday, they have a job. And I'm like, that must be nice to not have to bug out about, holy shit, what am I going to do? So it's rough. I was still now, I've technically been, so I became a stay-at-home dad. I started working for Major League Baseball, but that had gone away. I've been technically out of work for the last 2 years. I just started now to look back for teaching jobs to get back into it. So it's very, very nerve-wracking when you have so much coming in and then faucet shuts off.
And I suppose, obviously, once the initial scary logistics side of it is, when you've dealt with the, where am I going to, how much do I have to live from? What's my next job? I suppose when you think of the perspective as well, if we sort of bring this full circle back to the very start of the conversation, and you're that young boy watching wrestling with his dad, and someone would have turned to you and said, this is the career you're going to have, you would have probably bitten their hand off for it.
Oh, well, I don't know if I would have done that, but there's a saying in many languages, in many cultures, and it's paraphrasing, but if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my plan was, and I still don't. But I know at this point in my life, like I mentioned, being out of lucrative work for a couple of years and having my degree to say, you know what, I'm going to go back to teaching. You know what, I have 2 small children now and a wife and a home. Thank you, God. I'm going to go and I'm going to be Matt the teacher. And I'm going to be home every day at 3 o'clock, and I'm not going to miss a moment of my children's lives. I won't miss a birthday or a Christmas like all my peers have. I'll be there to make moments and memories with my wife. I won't be distant or estranged from her. I will set roots here and build off of what I had already done. Matt Stiker is a character that may or may not be dead, but Matthew K., my real name, I still have life to live as far as I know. So I would say as long as I can be happy, and After losing my father and then unexpectedly losing my sister, I desperately needed and wanted a family. And I believe God blessed me with a second chance at love in so many ways. So why would I give that up to say I'm going back out on the road to be the Intercontinental Champion? Eesh.
I mean, the grass is always greener, right? And I think that, you summed it up brilliant there. There's beauty to be found in any situation. And again, I imagine, your faith ties into this perfectly as well, being able to have that perspective.
It's gratitude. A lot of times, especially here in the States, people say faith or God's a bad word. I get the spirituality, universe, whatever it is. It's this energy that we give off to one another. That's really what it is. And I read something that I thought was really interesting, that for the most part, because of all the screens and all the processed foods and all the craziness and electromagnetic pulses, we as humans are antennae. We give off a static, and most of us are subdued. But if you can focus on one thing, whatever that one thing is, today I'm going to have a great day. Today I'm going to have a great day. Your beacon will become stronger than all the static that is around you, and your energy will rise, and you will literally attract your thought. Now, that might sound a little, hey man, hippy-dippy, but I believe that having gratitude and appreciation and thinking this is going to be okay. On the other side of this, I'm going to be better. I'm going to learn something. I'm 50 years old, and in the time that I started wrestling, it's 25 years, every time something has come up that has been deemed a negative, on the other side, I have been better. I have been different. I have grown. And that's enough of a sample size for me to say the next bad thing, oh, I know how this goes. This is going to suck or whatever. But you know something? There's a scab and then maybe a scar, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to have a story. So it's just how you go into stuff,
I love that, man. And I think that, I think a lot of people will take that away with them. And that's a great answer. And so it makes me want to ask a question. And this is the last question I'll ask you before we wrap up here. So on my main podcast, my personal development show, I ask the very same question when I finish every interview. And I'm going to ask you the question because just based on what we've talked about, and it's probably the only time I'll ask it on this show. But right now, for Matthew, what makes life worth living?
My kids, my wife. All I ever wanted was a family. I loved being a wrestler and all that, but I always felt very empty and alone. Even if I had a partner, even if I was with people, when that hotel door closed behind me, a lot of times, even if I had someone laying next to me, I was alone. And my father was my best friend, and when I lost him, I was even more alone. And then my sister, unexpectedly more alone. And the only friend that walked with me the entire time was God, And God called Abraham a friend in I think it's Torah, and I always thought it was so beautiful. So even if it's imaginary, even if I'm just talking to myself, my friend had always been there with me. Yeah. And I asked and I prayed in earnest, please, a family, because love is so amazing, and it sounds so silly, but if you love something, I don't care what it is. If you love a dog, if you love a stuffed animal, if you love Arsenal, whatever it is, you have passion. You're alive. Your cells are vibrating and exploding all around you. There's electricity. So my family and being a dad and being a husband and just wanting to let God know, I see what you've done. And I thank you so much. And now it's my job to teach them, not in a religious way, doth said this, but just understand that when that wind blows and that rain falls, or we have deer right outside our window, when those deer are there, something loves you. Something loves you enough to have brought you here to bring us together. And that's what keeps me going, man. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Oh, man. I've asked that question about 410 times.
What do others say?
I think I think that was my favorite answer. I think it felt so genuine, it felt so real, and I think everyone's going to resonate with that.
Some other answers that you get to that question, because it's a brilliant question, man.
The majority of answers I think people's instinct is to instantly go to family, or purpose. Another one that comes up a lot, right, is people saying, all that matters to me is when I wake up tomorrow, I've got something to wake up for. I've got something that I'm going to jump out of bed for, whether that is your family or, you know, if someone maybe who doesn't have a family, you know, they're waking up with a passion, they're waking up ready to chase something. And if they've got that, that'll get them out of bed. That tends to be, I think, what makes life worth living for most people.
Nice. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
I love it, brother. Well, if anyone listening, watching now, I know you're not a big social media guy, you don't post often. Is there any way that we can send people right now to connect with you or sort of follow along or support you in any way?
Sure, if you want. I'm still, I'm a little old, so I'm still on X. It's at Matt Striker TV. And yeah, man, I'll answer anybody. I love that stuff. Beyond that, that's about it.
Amazing. Well, I'll leave the link to the Twitter or the X, I should say, in the bio below for everyone to check out. But man, thank you so much. This hour's flown by. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's a conversation I mentioned that I really wanted to have, and it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure, my friend.
I want to thank you, and I want to let your viewers know that originally when you reached out, I was apprehensive because I didn't think I had anything to offer at this point, and then you kind of encouraged me. And now that this is over, I'm glad I did this, and I'm glad that it was with you because you asked some great questions, and I'm okay with where I am now, and thank you for bringing me to that. So thank you.